What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the TCL 30XL and the Motorola Moto G Pure. Now, before we go any further, as always, I do want to remind you to hit that subscribe button. And if you want to learn more about either of these phones individually, I will be linking to several other videos about them in the description, as well as some information about pricing and availability. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the TCL 30XL, we're getting a 6.82-inch LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, an aspect ratio of 20.5 by 9, and a 90% screen to body ratio. With the Motorola Moto G Pure, we're getting a 6.5-inch IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 270, an aspect ratio of 20 by 9, and an 80.6% screen to body ratio. So for what they are, both displays are pretty good, but I would say in general, the TCL 30XL does have a couple advantages here. First of all, as you can clearly see, the TCL 30XL is much larger than the Moto G Pure, and having a larger display tends to be a good thing when you're consuming a lot of content. And in addition to this, with an aspect ratio of 20.5 by 9 versus 20 by 9, the TCL 30XL also has a slightly taller and more narrow form factor. So if you're doing something like watching a video in landscape mode, for example, you're going to get a more immersive experience with the TCL 30XL. And if you're doing something like reading an article or scrolling through social media, with a taller and more narrow form factor, you'll be able to fit more content on the screen without having to scroll as much. So in general, again, while both phones do have pretty good displays for what they are, if you are really consuming a lot of content, the TCL 30XL will be a better choice. Now for storage, the TCL 30XL is getting 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and the Moto G Pure has 32GB with microSD card expansion as well. So here, the TCL 30XL definitely has a huge advantage with double the space of the Moto G Pure, and honestly, with 32GB, this is really barely even acceptable for a light user. So if you have a lot of apps and stuff like that, you're definitely going to want more space than this. On the other hand, with 64GB, while still not being really the ideal amount of storage in this day and age, since after all, apps are getting larger and larger and taking up more space, and even the system itself is not a small file by any means, 64GB is still definitely a lot better than 32, and as long as you watch what you're putting on your phone, 64 will be okay for you. But that being said, again, if you're really a light user and you hardly have anything on your phone, and you're really just using it for basic activities like sending text messages, making calls, browsing the web, and maybe some light social media use, but really not a whole lot else, the Moto G Pure will be okay. And remember, both of these phones do have microSD card expansion as well, and this is great for offloading stuff like photos and videos. Now for security features, both of these phones have face unlock, as well as fingerprint scanners right here on the back, so more of a classic spot, but definitely really easy to use and pretty convenient. But that being said, starting with the TCL 30XL, let's give the fingerprint scanners a try and see how well they work. There we go, one more time. And there we go. Moving on to the Moto G Pure. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both fingerprint scanners were real fast and responsive, no issues whatsoever. And again, remember, both phones have face unlock as well, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, both phones do have water drop notches for the front-facing camera. With the TCL 30XL, this camera is 13 megapixels, and with the Moto G Pure, this camera is 5 megapixels. With the TCL 30XL on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. With the Moto G Pure, we got a dual camera setup with a 13 megapixel main camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So as you can see here, as far as features go, the TCL 30XL does have a huge advantage here, having both an ultra wide camera and a macro camera, whereas the Moto G Pure unfortunately has neither. In addition to this, as far as photo quality goes, while neither of these phones are going to be the best by any means, the TCL 30XL is definitely going to be more suitable for those of you who are taking a lot of photos and you want them to come out nice, maybe for social media for example, but you still don't need the absolute top of the line quality. On the other hand, with the Moto G Pure, although the camera on this phone isn't really terrible per se, it's definitely not going to be nearly as good as the TCL 30XL, so maybe for something like Snapchat for example, where the quality really just doesn't matter at all, the Moto G Pure will at least get the job done. But again, if you are taking a lot of photos, because of the extra features and better quality, the TCL 30XL is definitely going to be a much better choice. Now as far as RAM and processor go, with the TCL 30XL, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio 825 processor. With the Moto G Pure, this phone is getting 3GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G25. So keep in mind, neither of these phones are really going to be very fast. Both of them, being more entry-level devices, are really meant for basic activities like sending text messages, making calls, and some light web browsing and social media use. And if you're doing higher performance activities like mobile gaming for example, or you're just going to be on your phone a lot, then neither neither of these devices is really going to be the best choice because again, being entry-level phones, they're really not the fastest. Now that being said, I did run Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both of them, and with the TCL 30XL, we're getting a single core score of 156 and a multi-core score of 885, and with the Moto G Pure, we're getting a single core score of 133 and a multi-core score of 476. So as you can see here, while again, neither phone is really exceptionally fast, the TCL 30XL is going to have a significant advantage. So if you do want the faster phone between the two, then the TCL 30XL will definitely be a better choice. But that being said, again, both of these phones are really meant for basic activities. So I would say in general, if you're really hardly going to be on your phone at all, the Moto G Pure will absolutely get the job done. But if you are going to be doing a few more activities like web browsing, social media use, and streaming content like videos and music, in general, you are going to get a better experience with the TCL 30XL. Now as far as the battery goes, the TCL 30XL has a 5000 mAh battery that supports 18 watt fast charging, and the Moto G Pure has a 4000 mAh battery that supports 10 watt fast charging. So as you can see here, there is a significant difference with the TCL 30XL having a much larger battery. So it really goes back to that same point. If you're really hardly going to be using your phone at all, the Moto G Pure will absolutely get the job done because with this battery, while not being the largest or best optimized battery out there, it still will at least last you through the day if you're not using it constantly. But on the other hand, if you are using your phone a little bit more, and maybe you have more of a mobile lifestyle and you're not always around a charger, the TCL 30XL will have much better battery life and longevity. And in addition to this, with the 18 watt fast charging, if you have a good fast charger, this will make a significant difference as well. But again, keep in mind, if you're really not using your phone a whole lot, the Moto G Pure, while not having the best battery out there, will still absolutely get the job done. Another thing to keep in mind here is that neither phone has NFC, so if you like to make contactless mobile payment services using tap and pay, keep in mind, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to do that with these phones. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? In general, in pretty much every way, the TCL 30XL is the better device here. It has a much larger display with a better aspect ratio as well. It also has double the storage, a much higher quality camera with a lot more features, a slightly faster processor, and a larger battery. So overall, if you are using your phone a little bit more and you want to take good pictures as well, the TCL 30XL will be a much better choice. But on the other hand, again, if you're really hardly using your phone at all and you really just need an affordable, well-rounded phone for basic activities, the Moto G Pure will still absolutely get the job done. Now once again, if you want to learn more about either of these phones individually, I will be linking to several other videos about them in the description, as well as some information about pricing and availability, because this is always changing. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.